So good morning, everyone. This is part two of our conversation with Dan Watkins, also known as the New Jersey hemp farmer, former economist, banker, veteran. And in our conversation in part one, we began to understand how Dan's previous experience led him to his current experience as a New Jersey hemp farmer. And for me, that was particularly interesting because I didn't understand how he came to the conclusion that this was a good business decision. So what I'd like for you to help us understand, which you did last time, is how people can apply their past experience to the available possibilities in New Jersey. And one of those was you just sort of guided me to, you can look here and see what's available. You know, there are all sorts of things available, or for that matter, when you talk about farming and being a hemp farmer, to understand that it could mean many different things.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So I think, no, thank you again. I appreciate it. And your forum, which is been focusing on cannabis, which is how I looked at what I'm doing now, full-time profession kind of thing. So a lot of things happened at the same time in the last few years. Obviously, the markets and making money and investing and cannabis and medical regulation. But at the same time, somewhere around 2014, as medical was expanding around the country, farming was also expanding with hemp. And I didn't really know what hemp was. I knew all about farming business. You talked a little bit about my banking career. What I did I started off in the markets with NASDAQ years ago, early 2000s, digitizing that market. Now every exchange around the world is digital. Everything that we do is digital, Bitcoin, all that other good stuff, right? And so towards the the middle part of my career, I was more involved in analytics. And analytics is really about looking at the past to try to come up with an understanding of what may happen in the future.
Right.
And they use algorithms, algebra, right? I'm not good at algebra, but you can come up with models and things to see what happened in the past and what can happen in the future. And what's interesting about that is that the commodities and the food market, as well as energy and things that grow from the earth, was also being digitized. Even like climate, for example. There's a lot of predictions about where the climate's going to go, but really the people who spend a lot of money on understanding the climate are actually farmers and geologists. They want to know, like, remember the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy? It was all about orange juice pricing. If there was a long winter, then you couldn't start the orange trees early enough, which means you would have a short harvest and the price of oranges would go up. And so they were all trying to figure out what the weather was going to be. And they still do that now. And so I started seeing a lot of those things happen from a banking technology analytics perspective. And then the later part of my career, more in risk management, was about trade finance. So what that means is the way countries or the way companies or people buy and sell things in different countries. It was all based on commodities, mostly farming. I we knew it. I didn't realize it. And then I started looking at some of the other things in banking. My job is who's financing food? Well, everybody is, right? Every country does. So you take U.S. for example. We grow more things than any other product we make. It's our largest gross domestic product is agricultural-like products. It's how the country was built and formed. We talked about this a little bit before during some of our very dark days in this country about cotton, and cotton was the gold of the world. It's really what got the U.S. going. Cotton is agricultural crops, right? You're probably wearing cotton somewhere on your body. I'm wearing cotton. Everybody's wearing cotton. You have to grow it, right? And now with energy, there's ethanol comes from corn. So people are growing more corn for energy, and all these things are just sort of moving around. And banks and businesses, or not businesses, but banks and finance, governments, survival of the earth, of people's health and nutrition is all dependent on that. So much so that China, second largest bank in the world, is China Agricultural Bank. They have 1 billion people. India has 1 billion people. They don't grow much, but they do grow food, obviously, but they don't grow enough to supply their population. So I looked at all that, and after about 20 something years, some friends were like, we should get into cannabis. Well, I'm an analyst. I look at cannabis. It's not a good business.
So let's talk about that, because basically you said that to me at one point and I didn't understand what you were talking about. Like everybody started to talk about cannabis and there was less conversation about hemp. And then even though the two are basically the same plant grown, right? So why is that?
Yeah. So so from my perspective, why cannabis isn't a good business is because it's a commodity business. So that means the more supply there is, the less demand there'll be. And so prices will always go down. So the more people that get involved, then naturally there's going to be more supply. So then there's going to be less and less and less to have. The other part for me personally is that I think that cannabis is personal, and that people don't necessarily, want other people to know that they're doing it or they're involved in it. Some people may believe it's personal medicine. And I think that there's going to come a point where people can actually have their own plants in their house. I have some, but they have their own plants in their house and do their own thing. Why enable an industry to do cannabis, which means it disables people from doing it. It forces everybody to go to the industry. And the way the government is set up in this country and most countries, it'd be government weed, and that disenfranchises people who have backgrounds that they're not comfortable with, people who might work in a regulated industry like banking, lawyers. A lot of people don't know this, but lawyers aren't allowed to participate in cannabis at all.
Right.
At all. It's against the bar, because it's federally restricted, right? And lawyers are licensed around so anyway, that's all I was, and then of course, I would say the last thing was the stock. So this is what got me interested in hemp and New Jersey and farming. So when you look at the stocks of cannabis companies, they're primarily based on the company's P&L, their profit and loss accounting ledger. And if you look at the ledger, or you look at the balance sheet of any company, you're going to find a couple things. Liabilities and assets, what they have to pay, what they owe, and what they have. How do they value their company? So everybody got into cannabis all over the place, buying stocks left and right. Stocks were skyrocketing through the roof. 2015, 16, 17. If you got involved in cannabis in 2015, just from the stock perspective, with $1,000, you'd be a millionaire right now. Well, you'd be a millionaire if you got out in 2018, because that's where I started seeing this inflation nonsense. But in the balance sheet of cannabis companies, the main asset that they all have is some sort of real estate. And this is interesting because this is how farms work. This is how many businesses work, right? If you have a business and you lease from somebody, your lease and your rent is higher than your income. And that's the same way farmers work, right? They have to lease some land, grow some crops. If they have a good year, they pay the lease, right? They make some money. They go back the next year with a request from the bank, finance their business again. So as cannabis was doing that, I realized these guys aren't selling anything. They're not really selling. Like in New Jersey, we have 9 million people, 3 million pets, right? We probably have a couple of other million or so undocumented people. We have millions of people that travel through New Jersey, and there's only 95,000 medical cards. What does that say? Does that mean that there's only 95,000 people involved in cannabis in New Jersey? No, it doesn't. The statistics say that 30% of people who like cannabis would do it every day, once a week, once a month, have 30%. So that would mean out of the 5 million adults, 6 million adults in New Jersey, 30% would be about 1.5 million people that smoke cannabis. They're not buying into the program.
Right.
No matter how well we try to fashion it up as medicine and the advocates, it's just not a good business. And you can see in Colorado and in California and in Oregon, all these people overexpanded, and what ended up happening is it became legal and nobody went to the regulated market. Now, at the same time, hemp was being regulated by farming. I go, oh, this is interesting. So let's look at farming.
Right.
How much is corn per pound? How much is hemp per pound? Wow. In 2018, if you were to grow 50 pounds of hemp, you can make a liter or a kilogram of CBD, right? You can extract it, and you got a couple of gallons or a gallon or half a gallon, whatever a liter is to a gallon. I think it's about half a gallon is a liter or so. And in 2018, just to have that extracted would have probably cost $10,000. And that's 1,000 grams or 1,000